The bracelet my sister found in my raincoat had the wrong clasp. Elaine did not know that. She held it over our mother's kitchen table with both hands, letting the blue stones catch the gray light from the window, and looked at me as though she had caught me taking cash from a church plate. Then she put a 12-page settlement agreement beside it. "Sign this, Martin, and it stays a family matter instead of becoming a police report." The rain had been running down the condo windows since breakfast. My coat was hanging behind the laundry room door because Elaine had told me to put it there. I remember that more clearly than I remember what I said next. I think I asked her to let me see the bracelet. She moved it closer to herself and said there was nothing to inspect. There was plenty to inspect. Our mother's bracelet had a flat box clasp with a tiny repair mark under the tongue. This one had a new lobster clasp that could have come from any shopping channel. The fourth sapphire in Mother's bracelet was also a shade lighter than the others. I had paid to replace it 6 years earlier, after she caught the bracelet in a car door. Every time she wore it after that, she complained that the pale stone looked like a clean tooth. The stones Elaine was holding matched perfectly. I did not tell her. I picked up the agreement, folded it once, and put it in the document case I had brought for probate papers. Elaine took that as agreement. She had once kept my birthday radio for a month because I did not ask twice. Our mother, Margaret Keene, died in January at 84. She had lived the last 20 months of her life at Bellwether House, an assisted living residence about 15 minutes from the condo. Her memory was unreliable near the end, although it was unreliable in an irritatingly selective way. She could forget that I had visited on Sunday and still remember the name of the boy who delivered milk to her street in 1952. Elaine lived 7 miles away. I lived 92 miles away and drove down every second weekend, more often when Mother was ill. That distance became the first entry in Elaine's private account of who had been the better child. She never said it directly while Mother was alive. She did not need to. If I changed a light bulb, Elaine mentioned the 4 medical appointments she had attended. If I paid the property tax, she reminded me that writing a check was not the same as being present. Some of that was fair. Elaine did more of the daily work. She collected prescriptions, spoke to the residents when the laundry went missing, and sat through the long care meetings where 6 people discussed whether Mother had eaten half a sandwich or 3/4. I thanked her for it. After Mother entered Bellwether House, she signed a durable financial power of attorney naming Elaine. I agreed because Elaine was nearby and I had no reason not to. The statements Elaine emailed looked ordinary. They showed the residence fee, pharmacy bills, utilities at the empty condo, and transfers into a household account she said she used for incidental expenses. I had spent 34 years examining property claims. I knew how quickly suspicion could turn a family into opposing files, and I did not want to live that way with my sister. So when an amount looked high, I told myself there had probably been a dental bill or an insurance renewal. I asked fewer questions than I would have asked a stranger. Mother's will was simple. After expenses, Elaine and I were to receive equal shares. The condo was mortgage-free. There was an investment account, some cash, and the usual contents of a home occupied by the same person for 31 years. Mother had named Elaine executor because she lived close. She had named me as alternate. The probate court appointed Elaine before we cleared the condo. Mother was almost childish about keeping things equal. At Christmas, she wrote our names on the backs of gift tags before wrapping anything, in case one package looked larger. Once, when Elaine and I were both in our 50s, Mother cut a lemon cake into 2 uneven halves, stared at them, and made us switch plates after we had sat down. Elaine laughed. I did too. It seemed harmless then. The bracelet was the only object Mother spoke about, as if it carried instructions. It had belonged to her mother. It was narrow, made of old white gold, with a line of small square sapphires broken by tiny diamonds. It was valuable, but not palace jewelry. Mother wore it to weddings, funerals, and the occasional lunch where she expected linen napkins. When the clasp broke, I took her to Arthur Bell, a jeweler whose shop had been on Linton Street since before I was born. Arthur said the original clasp had been repaired too many times and should be replaced. Mother argued with him for 20 minutes. She wanted it to remain original, although half the plumbing in her condo had been replaced without causing her any moral concern. Arthur finally made a new box clasp and stamped his small initials inside it. He replaced the damaged sapphire as well. I paid the invoice, and he emailed me close photographs for the insurance schedule. Mother later told both of us that Elaine should have the bracelet because Elaine had daughters. Elaine reminded me of that after the funeral. I said I remembered and that I had no objection. The will divided the estate equally but allowed us to agree on personal items. I expected the bracelet to go to Elaine. I never wanted it. The first thing that bothered me happened 3 weeks after the funeral. Elaine called and asked whether I would accept a cash payment instead of waiting for the estate to be settled. She said the condo market was soft and that she might keep the property herself. When I asked what amount she had in mind, she said she was still calculating the value of the care she had provided. "You said you weren't charging Mother," I told her. "I didn't charge her while she was alive. That doesn't mean the work had no value. I thought grief was making her talk like a bookkeeper. That was generous of me." Elaine had worked in residential real estate for 27 years. She understood values, commissions, lines, and the difference between an expense and a claim. She also knew that executors do not get to create debts after a person dies merely because they feel overlooked. I told her we should wait for the formal inventory. She became pleasant again and asked whether I could come down on Saturday to sort the condo. Elaine had already arranged the place when I arrived. Blue masking tape marked 3 areas in the living room: keep, donate, and estate sale. There were turkey sandwiches from the deli on the counter, still in their paper wrappers, and a roll of black trash bags beside Mother's flour jar. The kitchen clock was 5 minutes fast. Mother had kept it that way for years and then subtracted 5 minutes every time she looked at it. We worked without trouble for nearly 2 hours. I boxed the green glass bowls Mother never used and a drawer full of instruction manuals for appliances she no longer owned. Elaine dealt with the bedroom. At about 11, she came into the hall holding the empty velvet bracelet case. "Did you move this?" I said I had not. She asked again, louder. Then she checked the safe, the dressing table drawers, and the pockets of 2 handbags. The search felt rehearsed, although I did not have that word for it yet. Elaine kept looking at me before she looked into each new place. I offered to call the residence in case Mother had taken the bracelet with her. Elaine said she had checked Bellwether House weeks earlier. That answer stayed with me. Until that morning, she had never told me the bracelet was missing. She walked to the laundry room and took my raincoat from its hook. I was standing close enough to smell the lemon cleaner she had used on the counter. She put her hand into the inside pocket and brought out the bracelet. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she laid it on the table, opened her leather folder, and removed the settlement agreement. Under its terms, Elaine's total compensation for 5 years of care was fixed at $380,000. With earlier payments credited but not identified, she would receive the condo and all personal property. I would receive $85,000, and whatever remained would pass to her. I would waive objections to her accounting and release all claims against her. The document had been prepared before we entered the condo. My name was typed correctly on every page. She had prepared the agreement carefully. She had not examined the bracelet. I asked for a glass of water. Elaine seemed disappointed by the request, but she turned toward the sink. I took out my phone and photographed the bracelet where it lay beside the agreement. I got the clasp, the stones, and the empty velvet case in 3 frames. Elaine heard the camera sound on the 3rd one and turned around. "What are you doing?" "Keeping a record," I said. She picked up the bracelet. I did not try to stop her. I signed the sheet showing which boxes I had taken, put Mother's old mantel clock in my car, and left the rest where it was. The turkey sandwiches remained on the counter. Neither of us had opened them. For most of the drive home, I was angry with myself. Not with Elaine yet, or not entirely. I kept remembering the statements I had skimmed, the questions I had postponed, and the way I had thanked her for making matters easy. People in my former line of work sometimes believed fraud examiners had a special instinct. We did not. We had dates, photographs, receipts, and the patience to compare one ordinary thing with another. I had used none of that patience where my own mother was concerned. I stopped at a service plaza and read the agreement from beginning to end. The care claim was described as an oral contract beginning 5 years earlier. During 2 of those years, Mother still drove, did her own shopping, and complained if either of us tried to carry her laundry. Elaine's hourly calculation included nights, weekends, and a management fee. The agreement did not disclose how much she had already paid herself. It also included a sentence saying I acknowledged receiving the sapphire bracelet as an advance from the estate. That sentence explained the performance in the kitchen. If I signed, the false bracelet became my property and the real one stopped being Elaine's problem. I went home and opened the folder where I kept Mother's insurance papers. Arthur Bell's invoice was there, dated May 14th, 6 years earlier. The close photographs had been printed in color because Mother did not trust clouds, digital or otherwise. In the first image, the clasped tongue showed Arthur's mark. In the second, the pale replacement sapphire sat forth from the right. I placed my phone beside the prints and enlarged the photographs from the kitchen. I had no doubt the bracelet was a copy. Proving who had put it in my coat would take more than photographs. I did not call her. I sent a short email the following morning. I wrote that I would not sign the agreement, that I disputed the care claim, and that all estate property and records should be preserved. I asked her to place the bracelet in secure storage and provide the formal inventory when it was filed. I attached nothing. Her reply came 9 minutes later. Think carefully. Once outsiders are involved, I cannot protect you from what you did. I printed that as well. Arthur's shop was closed on Sundays and Mondays. I went there Tuesday morning. He was 76 by then and had reduced his hours, but the shop looked the same. Narrow cases, a brown carpet that held the shape of every cabinet, and a small desk fan turning even though it was cold outside. He remembered Mother before he remembered me. She never forgave me for that stone, he said. I showed him the 3 phone photographs without explaining where I had taken them. He used a loop on the screen which did not help, then asked me to enlarge the clasp. That isn't mine, he said, and the settings are cast. Your mother's were hand-cut. This is a reproduction, a decent one from a distance. Arthur still had the repair file. His records included the original appraisal, the invoice, 6 detailed photographs, and the measurements of the bracelet before and after repair. He gave me certified copies and wrote a 2-paragraph statement identifying his work. He would not say what had happened to the original because he did not know, and I was glad of that. A useful witness is one who stops at the edge of his knowledge. I hired a probate lawyer that afternoon. I told her the story in the order it had happened and put the documents on her conference table. She read Elaine's email twice. Then she asked the question I had been avoiding. If she is willing to do this over the bracelet, what do you think is behind the release from accounting? I said I did not know. Within a week, we petitioned the probate court to preserve the assets and compel both an estate inventory and an accounting of Elaine's use of the power of attorney. We did not accuse her of selling the original bracelet because we could not prove that yet. We stated what we could prove. The item she claimed to have recovered was not the item described in Mother's insurance schedule, and the settlement demand had been prepared before the supposed discovery. Elaine filed her inventory 2 days before the first hearing. The condo was valued at $610,000, nearly $200,000 below the range. In a written market analysis, she had prepared for Mother the previous year. The investment account held $248,000. I had believed it held more than $500,000. Elaine listed the unpaid balance of her care claim as an estate debt and described the bracelet as one vintage sapphire bracelet recovered from Martin Keene during inventory, value $4,500. She signed beneath a declaration that the inventory was true to the best of her knowledge. I had expected seeing the lie in formal print to make me furious. It made me tired. The woman who used to telephone me because Mother had bought the wrong kind of yogurt was now asking a court to believe I had stolen from our dead mother. There was no misunderstanding left to preserve. The first hearing lasted 43 minutes. Elaine wore a charcoal suit I remembered from the funeral and sat with her lawyer at the opposite table. Her account was simple. She said, Mother had promised to compensate her for years of sacrifice. She said she had discovered the bracelet in my coat and offered a private settlement to spare the family embarrassment. Her lawyer argued that my objection was retaliation by an absent son who had become interested only after seeing the condo value. Her version worked because some of it was true. I did live farther away. Elaine had done more appointments. She had given up time. The judge did not decide who was honest that morning. He ordered Elaine not to sell the condo or distribute funds, required a full accounting within 30 days, and directed her to place the bracelet with a bonded estate appraiser. He left her in place as executor until the evidence could be tested. Outside the courtroom, Elaine caught up with me near the elevators. You are spending both our money to prove you were a bad son, she said. I pressed the button and watched the floor numbers descend. There were other people nearby, including both lawyers. Elaine knew better than to mention the bracelet. Send the accounting, I said. The first accounting arrived on the last permitted day. It consisted of 4 bank statements, a spreadsheet prepared by Elaine, and a stack of receipts in no recognizable order. She claimed total compensation of $380,000. The spreadsheet credited $296,000 already paid and called the remaining $84,000 in estate debt. She documented less than $19,000 in groceries, mileage, pharmacy purchases, and household repairs. Most earlier payments appeared as transfers to Mercer Home Services, a company she had formed after Mother entered Bellwether House. Some transfers were labeled care coordination. Others said property management, emergency availability, or family liaison. Mother was already paying the residents for medication management, meals, housekeeping, and a 24-hour call service. The condo had been empty except for our visits. Still, Mercer Home Services charged $4,000 in 1 month for meal preparation and another $3,000 for overnight supervision. There were also gaps. The statements for Mother's main investment account ended 14 months before her death. No closing statement was included. A separate household account showed deposits Elaine had not explained and withdrawals made at an ATM near her office. One deposit caught my attention because it was not round. $42,618 had entered the household account the previous April. The description read Breer Auction Client Pay. The same afternoon, $42,000 had been transferred to Mercer Home Services. I read that line several times. Then I went back to Arthur's appraisal. Mother's bracelet had been insured for $48,000. Elaine's lawyer answered our next request by saying the auction payment related to furniture. That was possible. Mother owned a walnut dining set, 2 old rugs, and several pictures she believed were better than they were. My lawyer issued subpoenas to Breyer Auction House and the bank. Elaine objected, lost, and then accused me in an email of turning Mother's life into a criminal investigation. The auction records arrived in an envelope 6 weeks later. The consignment agreement named Elaine, acting under Mother's power of attorney. Lot 184 was described as an Art Deco sapphire and diamond-lined bracelet in white gold. The catalog photographs showed the pale fourth stone, the handmade settings, and Arthur's box clasp. Breyer had sold it for $47,000. After commission and fees, the payment was $42,618. Elaine had deposited the money into Mother's household account, which made the transaction look proper for a few hours. Then she moved $42,000 to her company and used most of it to bring a commercial loan current. That transfer was included in the $296,000 already paid to Mercer Home Services. The remaining $618 stayed in Mother's account. Soon after Mother entered assisted living, Mercer Home Services bought 2 houses for renovation, just before borrowing costs rose sharply. Elaine then began paying interest with new debt and using Mother's accounts as though they were a quiet extension of her own. The power of attorney allowed Elaine to sell personal property for Mother's benefit. It did not allow her to pay herself with the proceeds or make gifts to herself. Elaine's explanation was that Mother had given her the bracelet years earlier. That might have been persuasive if Elaine had not later sworn that the bracelet belonged to the estate and had been recovered from my coat. My work had taught me to build a chronology before forming a theory. I used a yellow legal pad with 3 columns, what Elaine claimed, where Mother actually was, and where the money went. On one line, Elaine charged 70 hours of in-home supervision during a week when Mother was in the hospital. On another, she billed for driving Mother to 4 appointments that the resident's transport log showed had been canceled. She charged a monthly fee for managing the condo while also paying a real management company from Mother's account. There were legitimate expenses mixed in. Elaine had bought groceries, replaced a leaking water heater, driven hundreds of miles, and spent whole afternoons at Bellwether House. I marked those separately. I did not want a judge to hear that my position was that her time had meant nothing. She had done real work, and the genuine receipts made her invented charges less obvious. Complete records showed that Elaine, using her access under the power of attorney, had transferred $296,000 to Mercer Home Services in 18 months. Elaine produced no timesheets created at the time, no service agreement signed by Mother, and no business records beyond invoices she had generated after the funeral. Her company had no employees and no other clients. Most transfers had gone toward its renovation loans, Elaine's personal credit cards, and the mortgage on a lakeside cottage she had bought with her husband years earlier. The replica took longer to trace. The kitchen photograph gave us its design, but there were dozens like it. Then a household account statement showed a charge for $239 to an online estate jewelry dealer 4 days before the condo clearing. Elaine had categorized it as memorial supplies. The dealer's records showed a sapphire reproduction delivered to Mother's condo in Elaine's name. Its stock number, measurements, clasp stamp, and a small scratch beside the hinge matched the bracelet held by the bonded appraiser. When I saw that image, I had to leave my lawyer's office for a few minutes. I stood in the corridor beside a framed print of a sailboat and watched the elevator doors open and close. The fake had not been an impulsive idea. Elaine had searched for it, paid for it with Mother's money, had it sent to Mother's home, and placed it in the coat she told me where to hang. I was less composed in private than I appeared in court. For several weeks I woke at 3 or 4 in the morning with pieces of the condo scene returning in the wrong order, the sandwiches, the empty case, Elaine turning toward the sink so I could understand I was meant to look guilty even to myself. I began keeping the radio on in the kitchen because the house felt too quiet. There were moments when settling would have been easier. By midsummer, my own legal bills had passed $38,000. Estate funds were advancing some of Elaine's legal bills while she remained executor, subject to review when the case ended. That meant half of every unnecessary motion might still come indirectly from my inheritance. Friends asked why I cared about money I had never possessed. I usually said it was not only the money, which was true and also an incomplete answer. $300,000 was still $300,000. I did not become noble merely because my sister had behaved badly. Elaine sat for a deposition in August. She said Mother had promised to pay her for care. She could not name the date of the promise or describe a payment rate. She said the bracelet had been given to her in 2021, sold with Mother's permission, and replaced because Mother regretted parting with it. Then she said she had forgotten the replacement was not original when she listed it in the estate inventory. My lawyer asked why a bracelet belonging to Elaine had been planted in my coat and described as an estate asset. Elaine answered that she had found it there. Did Martin Keene have access to the reproduction before the morning you searched his coat? I don't know what Martin had access to. The dealer says it was delivered to you 4 days earlier. Where did you keep it? Elaine looked at her lawyer. He told her to answer if she knew. At the condo, probably. That was the first time I saw she no longer had an answer. She reached for a water bottle, found the cap still on, and spent too long trying to turn it in the wrong direction. We moved for her temporary suspension and attached the deposition, bank records, and dealer file. After an expedited hearing the following week, the court removed her as executor on an interim basis and appointed a professional administrator. That decision did not settle the case. Elaine still claimed reimbursement, disputed the value of the condo, and argued that every transfer had been approved by Mother. The administrator found another $61,000 in unexplained withdrawals and filed a separate demand for repayment. At mediation, Elaine offered to abandon the care claim if I agreed that the earlier transfers were gifts and made no complaint about the bracelet. Under her proposal, she would keep the condo and pay me $320,000 over 5 years. It was far more than the $85,000 she had offered in Mother's kitchen. It was also secured by nothing. The mediator left us alone in separate rooms while he carried figures back and forth. Near the end of the day, Elaine asked to speak to me directly. The lawyers allowed it with the door open. Mother wanted me looked after, she said. She wanted us treated equally. You have a pension. You have your house. I gave her 5 years. Then submit the 5 years you can document. She stared at me for a long time. The anger passed, and what remained looked like exhaustion. If you take this to a judge, there will be no family left. I thought of the agreement already printed before her hand entered my coat. There wasn't one in that kitchen, I said. The mediation ended without a settlement. The final hearing was set for November. The hearing took 3 days. Arthur testified for less than an hour. He identified his repair mark, the pale sapphire, and the photographs he had made 6 years earlier. A records officer from Briar identified the consignment file and payment. The online dealer's invoice established when Elaine bought the replica and where it was delivered. The records established each step from the sale of Mother's bracelet to the search of my coat. Elaine testified last. Her lawyer guided her through the years of appointments, errands, interrupted weekends, and calls from Bellwether House. Much of it was true. I listened to her describe Mother refusing medication and once leaving the residence through a service door. I had forgotten that afternoon. Elaine had found her 2 streets away, sitting at a bus stop with no coat. Listening to her, I remembered that some of the burden she described had been real. Then my lawyer asked why the replacement bracelet was in my raincoat. Elaine said she did not put it there. Who else knew it had been delivered to the condo? I don't know. Why did your settlement agreement say Mr. Keene had received the bracelet before you say you discovered it? Elaine looked down at the copy. The sentence was on page 9. She said her lawyer had drafted the language. My lawyer handed her an earlier sworn answer in which she had admitted supplying the facts and approving every term. Elaine said she did not remember. The judge asked one question of his own. Mrs. Mercer, if your mother gave you the original bracelet in 2021, why did you declare under oath that it belonged to her estate in 2025? Elaine said she'd had been confused by grief. The written decision arrived 19 days later. The court credited Elaine for $18,940 in documented expenses. It rejected the rest of her care claim because there was no agreement, no reliable record, and no evidence Mother intended to pay commercial rates. It found that Elaine had breached her duties under the power of attorney, concealed estate information, and submitted a false inventory. She was removed permanently. The court surcharged her for the unauthorized transfers, interest, disallowed defense fees, and a large portion of the professional administrator's costs. The court did not award me her inheritance. That is how Elaine described it afterward, but it was not what happened. The administrator deducted what she owed from her share. Mine was calculated from the estate as it should have existed. It was the equal division Mother had written down years before anyone needed it. The condo sold through an open listing for $836,000, $226,000 more than Elaine's inventory value. The investment account had been damaged by withdrawals but not emptied. After taxes, fees, and the final adjustment, I received a little less than half of what Mother had owned before the transfers began. Elaine received considerably less, because much of her half had already passed through Mercer Home Services and into debts she could not recover. Mercer Home Services closed the following spring. One property went back to the lender, and she sold the cottage. I learned those things from public notices and from a cousin who assumed I already knew. I did not keep following what happened to her business. Elaine called me once after the estate closed. Her voice sounded ordinary, which made the conversation harder. "Was it worth losing your sister?" she asked. I nearly gave her the answer I had prepared during all those months. Instead, I asked why she had chosen my raincoat. She was quiet for a moment. "You always hang it where you're told," she said. That was as close as she came to admitting anything. She said Mother would have hated the court case. I agreed. Mother would also have hated the account statements, the auction listing, and the agreement waiting on her kitchen table. Elaine ended the call without saying goodbye. The original bracelet was never recovered. The buyer had purchased it through a proper auction and had no part in what Elaine did. The estate recovered the bracelet's value from Elaine's share, but the bracelet itself remained with someone whose name I never learned. Arthur offered to help me have another made. I thanked him and declined. I kept the mantel clock from the condo. The professional administrator listed it at $40 and assigned it to me with Elaine's written consent. For months it sat silent on a shelf because the winding key was missing. I found the key eventually in Mother's flour jar, under a bundle of rubber bands and 2 expired coupons. There was no reason for it to be there. Mother put small things in places she considered safe, and then forgot the system. People who hear this story usually ask whether I should have challenged Elaine earlier, when the statements first stopped making sense. I ask myself the same question. You can tell me if you think I waited too long. I know only that suspicion would not have protected Mother by itself. Records did that, once I finally insisted on seeing them. The clock runs now. It gains 5 minutes every week, and every Sunday I set it 5 minutes fast again. I know how to make it accurate. I leave it the way Mother kept it.